all of us in this room have at least one thing in common, and that is we are all subject to behavioral biases. Now, what are these behavioral biases? They are departures or deviations from rationality or then kind of good judgment. You know, something which is systematic and which deviates from rational principles. They are subject of a very intensive stream of research in many disciplines, including mine own, finance. And what I'm going to do today is to give you a number of examples from finance and show how these behavioral biases can either be good or how they can be bad for an individual. And I'm also going to talk about the ugly side of these biases. So what's the good part? The good part is that these biases, they may induce us to do things that we would not otherwise do, and something which actually can be positive for us. So basically we can, because of these biases, and if they are used in a skillful way, we may be tricked into doing something that we wouldn't otherwise do and which is good for us. So that's a good part, and I will give you some examples of that. The bad part is simple. Behavioral biases can hurt us, and I'll also talk about that. And finally, and that is the ugly part, others may prey on our biases. They may try to take advantage of us because they know that we are biased. So let's talk first about the good part. So the good part is, I have taken an example from a savings plan called Save More Tomorrow, SMT. So that's kind of an idea how to make people save more, which is often an important thing to do. Many people do not have enough, for instance, savings for their old days in the pension, and it may make sense to try to add up to those savings when they are still in the working life. Now, if you do an ordinary treatment, you, for instance, try to educate people, try to talk to them. They may say that saving is a great idea, but they don't do it. So how do you trick people into doing that? So a few simple behavioral principles. So first of all, people, they plan to save more, but given that they rarely follow through, so they have good intentions, but they don't do that. The other thing is that that it's easier to make a costly decision if you commit to doing that in the future and not today. So you say that, okay, I'm going to do that next year, not today, then it's fine. The other thing, third thing here is loss aversion, which means in this setting, in that people are very reluctant to admit a decline in their paycheck. So, take home salary, you don't want to cut that. So, that's generally a no-no. But there's another thing, which is a fourth point, which is money illusion. So, when there's some inflation, say, for instance, right now we are talking about, say, a little bit less than 2% of inflation. As employees, we might still be okay with a salary increase, which is actually not as large as what the inflation is. But that's the real value of money will go down. But that can be considered acceptable. So basically, as long as we are going to get a nominal raise, not necessarily a real raise, we may be happy. The final point is that inertia is a very powerful influence. As human beings, we are happy of not doing anything. So that's a very powerful thing. So how do you implement that? Go to a company and you tell to people that, okay, you don't need to do anything today, but next time when you get the salary raise, so let's say that we put some of that raise, not your base salary, but some of that raise aside. So let's say that next time you get the raise, you will put 1/3 of that aside. And then you also commit putting for any subsequent raises, say 1/3 aside or whatever. So as a result, when your pay goes up, I mean, it's good news, your salary increases, so you don't feel that there's a sacrifice going on. And although the purchasing power of your take-home salary may actually go down because of inflation, it still feels okay because, there's this money illusion going on. And you don't need to do anything. You do this one deal, and then, this will work automatically. Now, this has been tested in a number of companies, and it actually works very well. So, like, according to the most cited study, in 3.5 years, that led to quadrupling of the savings rate, voluntary savings rate for pensions. And it works far better than any ordinary treatment, like education or so. Okay, bad. So behavioral biases can also be bad. And here's an example of overconfidence. So first I've taken an example from animal kingdom of overconfidence. Here we have an overconfident cat. So basically this cat has some excessive trust in its ability when it's trying to approach a falcon or an eagle. Now, we also observe overconfidence among people. So here's just a few examples of overconfident people and even overconfident experts. So you can have very, very well-known people, somebody who really know their stuff, and still they make some severe errors. So the first example here is about former US President Reagan. He was, before becoming a politician, he was an actor. And once he was trying to get a part as a president in a movie, and the studio executive basically said that no way, you don't have the presidential look. So you could be the president's best friend, for instance, but not the president. The last example here, this is from Harvard Economic Society. They issued a weekly letter 1.5 months after the Great Depression or the warning shot for the Great Depression started, so the stock market crash of 1929. They said that a severe depression like that of 1920 to 21, which was actually not a particularly severe one in hindsight, and that's outside of the range of probability. And what happened, of course, was something far worse than what happened in 1920 to 21. And this was Harvard. All right, so what's my finance example here? Well, here, there's a lot of trading activity on the stock market. Overall, if you trade against other people, you better know what you are doing, at least if you do that for speculative purposes. If you are not a better trader than traders on average, then you can expect to lose. And certainly, if nothing else, you are going to lose on transaction costs. So that's kind of a deadweight cost that always comes. You will pay to the brokerage firm, and also on top of that, any trades will trigger potential tax liabilities to the government. So that's another thing that adds cost up. Nevertheless, there's a lot of trading, and there's some interesting research as to which kind of people trade more. And there's overwhelming evidence that men trade more than women. Okay, now the interesting part here is that there's also psychological research which finds that men tend to be more overconfident than what women are. We men tend to think that we are always better than average, and that's why we want to trade a lot. Now, if you look at the actual trading records of men and compare that to the trading records of women, what happens is that the men, they perform less well than women. That's not because they would choose the stocks in a worse way. They don't have any adverse ability there or any market adverse ability to time the market, but it comes because of the excessive transaction cost. They think that they know better, they end up trading more, and as a result they lose in terms of the deadweight costs. Now, overconfidence is not a stable trait. It actually can change over time. So here's an example of that. So people can actually learn to become overconfident. So, and the interesting thing here is that it's not just some people who accidentally become overconfident, but rather there's some systematic patterns here. And the systematic pattern comes from the wealth generation process. So if you are really lucky, if you are lucky with your investments, then people often tend to attribute much of their success to their own ability. Now, when it comes to investing, of course, part of it is on average, part of it is due to ability, but a very large part is due to luck. So, if you have been successful, you may think that you are good, but actually the only thing that has happened is that you have been extremely lucky. So as a result, when you have successful traders, they start to think that they are better than what they actually are. They start to take risks that perhaps they shouldn't do. If nothing else, they start to trade more because now they think that they are so good, which then will cost to them. Now, trading is not by far not the only application of this idea. CEOs are a good example of that as well. So companies which have had very successful leaders, they start to think that everything they touch turns into gold. Now, that may not always be the case. It can actually be that they have been just lucky, and then they start taking risks that they can no longer handle. All right, what's the ugly part? So here, I've taken an example from anchoring, and precisely anchoring in negotiation settings. So let me first tell you, with a simple example, what anchoring is. So here's an experiment from college students. So students were asked the following questions in this precise sequence. So how happy are you, and how often are you dating? Now there's a positive correlation between those two things, but it's not particularly large, 0.11. All right. You take another set of students, otherwise similar, and the only treatment that you do is that you swap the order of the questions. So how often are you dating? And then you are being asked, how happy are you? And suddenly the correlation jumps from 0.11 to 0.62. So the first question is kind of a leading question. So first you are asked whether you are dating. Well, dating is kind of fun. I must be happy because of that. And that leads to a high correlation. So the dating question that acted as an anchor to the happiness question in this example. But anchoring can be done in many ways. But the leading part will have an effect on what happens next. So the first piece of information offered will be important not only on informing opinions, as in the dating example, but also when we make decisions. Now, how can we take advantage of that? So think about a negotiation situation. So here's a couple of finance-related examples. Let's say that you want to buy another company. You make an offer for that company. You place a bid. Now, the exact level where you will place a bid will have an effect on, that will serve as an anchor, and that will affect the outcome of the future negotiations. So another example is real estate prices. You first post a price, and then that will have an effect on what the potential buyers think about what would be a suitable price for that piece of real estate. Now, many skillful negotiations actually they understand that this is going on. So, just a couple of weeks ago, there was a interview by Risto Siilasmaa, the chairman of Nokia, where he described the process of selling the cell phone operations of Nokia to Microsoft. So how it went first was that Microsoft gave an offer for those operations, and it was very low. Now, the idea was to serve as an anchor for any future negotiations. So what did Mr. Siilasmaa do? He thought for a while, and then he said that this offer is from another planet than what we have in mind, and then basically said that we cannot continue talking, and then packed. and then there was a silence for whatever, a month or two, and then the negotiations started again. So in that case, the idea was to de-anchor so that you wouldn't make a counteroffer to the first unreasonably low price, but rather, Microsoft made another bid, and in this case, in a more realistic level, which then allowed a kind of series of bids and counterbids, which then effectively led to a deal. Now, it's not only the level of the anchors that matters, but also the accuracy of the anchor matters. So, suppose that you want to sell an apartment, and it's valued. If you can have a listing price of, say, about 500,000, or then let's have an accurate price like 491,000. That will actually have a different effect on the prospective buyer. If you have this very accurate anchor, then the buyer will think that actually you have gone through some perhaps detailed valuation and so on. It's not a coincidence that you have a 491,000, and it sounds like something that there was some active process which led to that. So basically, in that case, and there's research which shows that indeed is the case, the price will eventually converge to a larger price. So any counterbids will then be at a higher level than in the case where the initial bid would be on a very coarse level, like 500,000. Because if you make a 500,000 bid, then the counter bid could be, say, 450,000. And it's a very coarse number. And then that could converge to tends to converge to a smaller price. So it actually makes sense to give accurate anchors if you are trying to sell something, and you are the first to make an offer. Now, people's susceptibility to anchoring, that depends on their experience and personality. Risto Siilasmaa, he's an experienced businessman, and either he figured it out himself or he had learned it from somewhere that actually in his negotiation experience it made sense to take a break to the negotiation instead of trying to negotiate based on the price that Microsoft had initially given. There's also certain personality types which are more suspect to anchoring. So people who are so-called yes men, they tend to be more inclined to accept others' anchors. Okay, let me summarize. So we're talking about three different biases, how they can affect people in three different ways. The good part here is that if we harness these biases properly, they can actually induce us to do some positive things we would not otherwise do. And we had as an example, Save More Tomorrow savings plan. The bad example of, from a well-being perspective, bad example of a behavioral bias is overconfidence, which actually can hurt us in a severe way in the case of trading because of transaction cost and also increased tax liabilities. And finally, the ugly part is that others can prey on our behavioral biases, and as an example, we had the anchoring in negotiation. Thank you.